Welcome to the It's Time podcast with your host, Professor Dale Feinauer from the University of Wisconsin-Oshkosh College of Business Graduate Programs.
Welcome to another edition of the It's Time podcast. I'm really excited today to have one of my colleagues and friends working with us today, Bryan Lilly, who's one of the marketing professors at the university. As I noted, this season, in addition to having business leaders, we're also going to be talking to academics about their functional area and how it relates to leadership, what leaders need to know about that area. But Bryan, let's start with a little bit about you. Tell me about you and why did you become an academic? Why are you doing this for a living?
It was a good challenge. And I started my career after college, worked for 8 years in industry, a couple different companies. My wife and I had a small child, and I got to the point where I thought, okay, now I need another challenge. And I had finished my MBA at Northwestern, and I talked to a couple of the professors there, and they talked to me about several different things. And one of them was going on for my PhD, and I thought, that does sound like a challenge. And it was, and was fun, really, really challenging. And then after that, what I thought I was going to do was work at this university for 6 years and then go back into industry. I really enjoyed my time in industry. And I wanted to do at least 6 years in academia so that I would get tenure and then leave. You don't want to leave academia when people think, well, you left because you didn't.
Because they fired you.
Right. So I thought I'd get tenure and then leave. And I liked it here and I liked what I do. And I thought, I'm just going to stay here and do this for a while.
And how long have you been doing, quote, this now?
A while has become 25 years.
So you've been at this a long time.
Yeah.
And your role in academia, you've taken on some leadership roles within academia. Tell us a little bit about your leadership journey, some of the ways you've been a formal and an informal leader within the College of Business.
Well, I've done some curriculum development, including, for example, in our undergraduate College of Business program, we now have a required course in quantitative business analysis, which teaches students how to use spreadsheets for a variety of types of business problems, not just marketing, sales problems. And I designed that with input from the business community, input from other professors in the college, and then I just tag it, and other people have taught it since then. So that was one of the curriculum things. We have a College of Business networking night type of deal, which came out of an initial thing that we did in marketing called the Marketing Mixer. For 2 years, we were at Fratello's with a number of different companies. And a couple of the companies that went over to Fratello's to network with our students actually approached me and said, do you mind if we try and do this at a larger scale with all the disciplines in your college? And okay, go ahead. And so that's another example. I was on the board of directors for Professional Association for about 15 years. So that entailed some leadership in terms of thinking about what should we do with our programming membership and connecting that group with our student club in marketing and sales. So those were a few examples.
And how have you found trying to be being a leader in an academic environment? What are the challenges of that?
Is this the time to turn the mic off? Dale, so I did leadership in my 8 years in industry. I would say that the ability to be a leader is different when you compare industry to academia, and probably for two different reasons.
Okay.
One reason is that, at least in my role in industry, and I get it that every industry is different, but in my role, you could see where the income connected to the costs. So I worked in logistics, transportation. So you're going to sell transportation services, and you're going to pay your employees and your equipment and things like that to
provide. You had expenses and you had revenue.
And you could see where, if we put more money into the cost side of it, how you could determine, will that pay off on the revenue side? And you make decisions on the cost side based on what our customers going to pay for and where does this drive our profits.
Okay.
And
so a relatively clear objective function, if you will.
Yeah.
Okay.
And we made decisions to not just maximize revenue, but sort of long-term make sure that we had the kind of capabilities that would enable us to provide the services we wanted to provide long-term.
Okay.
Now you flip over into academia, which is a nonprofit, at least in our sector of academia. And in nonprofits, or at least in academia, and I've talked to people in nonprofits in other areas, and I think that what I've seen in academia also occurs in some other nonprofit areas. There is a fundamental separation between the revenue generation and the cost, where the people who are responsible for making the decisions about what do we spend money on are not held accountable and don't even always see how will this affect revenue, and it may not affect revenue. And as a result, you get decisions about what to spend money on that are not necessarily going to drive the revenue. It drives me nuts. So when you ask me about leadership, and I sort of facetiously say, is now the time to turn off my mic. One of the issues that I see in academia is that we have separation to a large extent between the visibility of drivers of revenue and drivers of cost, and it does some things that make us sort of wonky. The other thing is that we are in government, and government is just horribly inefficient. And I'm a government employee, and I see that. And I came from the private sector, so I see it in a way that is, wow, I get it that there are some reasons why you can tolerate the inefficiencies because they provide some other things. But some of the inefficiencies, we isolate ourselves to the extent that we talk among ourselves in terms of why it's important to do it this way. And I look and think, okay, this is just not good. And it wouldn't work outside of this type of arena. So my own experience has been that if you really like leadership, do it in private industry, where you can do things because they make sense, as opposed to what are the rules. And you can do it because you can say, I can see where X causes Y, as opposed to academia, where it's just a little different. I'm not saying some people are probably a better fit for leadership in academia or other types of nonprofits or other areas of government, and some people are better fits for private industry leadership. Personally, I'm more comfortable on the private industry side, which I have, having been on both. I like my role in academia.
So you found being a leader in the private sector was a better fit for you.
Correct.
But you stayed in academia because
I like the work. I like the people. I like the work. I like what I do. My own objective function is not to be the person with the highest point on the pyramid or the person with the fanciest title. You've even seen my students call me Bryan, and I tell them just call me Bryan. So I'm not driven at this point in my career for the kinds of things that come with the leadership.
But you are an informal leader within the college.
Sometimes.
I mean, as a guy in the college, I know that you're an informal leader. You're someone who does make things happen in the college. You just do it not necessarily from a formal leadership perspective.
Fair enough, and it happens sometimes, and a lot of times I do the grunt work just like everybody else does, Dale, so it's not as though I desire the leadership stuff. It's just sometimes you speak your piece and you have an idea and you pop it out there, and sometimes that idea goes somewhere and people say, oh, that was good leadership. Well, okay, but it wasn't because I wanted to be a leader. It's just because, all right,
you wanted to get something done.
I wanted to get something done, and that's the way to do it, and it worked. And not everything works.
How have you dealt with it doesn't always work? Because, I certainly share this, there are times when we propose ideas and you try to get things done and they don't happen. How do you motivate yourself to get up and, okay, let's throw something out the next day and try again?
I think that's just personally who I am. I have some thick skin. I have a tendency to be persistent. People tell me overly persistent. And not everybody's comfortable with that type of style and continued pushing for things. But I tend to push for things if I believe they're the right thing to do until somebody can explain to me why it really doesn't make sense. Then I'm more willing to back off. I have a colleague, you know her, and she's told me, Bryan, don't fight every battle, pull back and this and that. And I don't know. Also, academia is an atmosphere where, to a large extent, you can pick a really thorny type of challenge to go after, and you have a lot of autonomy in terms of how you do it. And that's true with your research and your course design and how you go about your service engagements and so forth. Now that's not true about all areas of academia. And you talk to staff members and these are the rules I follow. Well, as a faculty member, as long as I'm doing my job well, the rules are not put in front of professors in the same way in terms of you have to follow step by step by step by step. It's more about here's the outcomes we're after. Go figure out how to do it.
Okay.
And that works well for me.
Well, let's talk about those outcomes for a minute. And you mentioned the research side, but let's talk about the classroom where you're leading a classroom. You're the person in the front of the room and you're leading the class. You noted that you're quite comfortable with the students calling you Brian as opposed to necessary something else.
Yeah.
Professor Lilly or whatever else students might mumble about us on that side of the desk. How do you approach being a leader in the classroom?
Well, it's a good question. Tell me what you mean by leader.
You're a leader, I would define as one who is trying to create an environment in which others can be successful to achieve some outcome. You're trying to create an environment in which students can be successful, achieve an outcome, presumably of learning something about marketing, yada, yada.
Okay.
How do you lead a classroom to get to that desired outcome?
A lot of the leadership is the design of the course itself, not necessarily what you do moment to moment to moment in the classroom. So, for example, in the sales course, because right now my primary educational responsibility with our students is teaching our professional business to business. It could be business to consumer, but generally it's complex sales, which tends to be B2B. And objectives for the students are to have the students lead a lot of discussions because they need to be comfortable sitting with customers and dialoguing with customers and asking questions to customers and really listening and figuring out how do I take what a customer is saying and translate that into something that does some good for both the customer and my company. And so to some extent, the way I've structured that class is the class members come to the front of the room and they lead class sessions. And I moderate, I sit there, I poke them and so forth, but they do a really good job. And it takes a while for them to adapt to that role. But my leading is to some extent putting them on stage. And we have, so for as an example, the class might have read a chapter of a book or have gone through some type of sales scenario. And then there's going to be some questions about why did this work, what worked well and what didn't work well and why, and what does this suggest that we do differently in terms of selling or sales management or our sales process or qualifying customers or whatever it is. And the students that are responsible for leading the discussion, they need to come up with the discussion questions. They need to figure out how to draw the class members as an audience.
So you have the students come up with what are the right questions.
Correct.
So you've really delegated an awful lot of the what's going on here to the students.
Correct. Now,
you've led by delegating responsibility.
Correct. Now, they do have some, I give them some examples of what kinds of questions are likely to produce good discussions and which types of questions are not. And if their questions need to be amended a little bit, I'm always in the classroom and I'm on the side. No, friendly amendment. Jake, friendly amendment, would you accept the question as this instead of that, and so forth. So
you're coaching.
It's a joint effort. I am a minor discussion leader, but the students take the major stage. And this happens for probably 25% of the class sessions during the semester. Plus, we have other classes with other types of things where I'm not in front. I'm really in front of the class, talking a lot as a professor in perhaps 25% of the classroom experiences.
So most of your leadership is quiet leading from the back as opposed to the I'm in charge leading from the front.
Sort of. My friendly amendment to that would be it's not quiet from the back, but it is not in the front. It's off to the side. And it's to the side on purpose. From a side view, I see everybody better. And I am not silent, but I'm chiming in. Depends where the conversation goes. We have some really, really tough cases that we chew on. You know, as an example, you have a an underperforming sales reps with a history of being really successful in some ways and not successful in other ways. And what do you do about that? And that case conversation goes in different ways. And I've sometimes had guest professionals from businesses who work in sales and sales management and come in and pick sides with the students back and forth. And those kinds of discussions are very useful if you're a student trying to figure out, how do I wrap my head around this?
And now a short break to let some of the folks from the College of Business talk about various programs and services that the College of Business provides. Thank you.
The University of Wisconsin-Oshkosh MBA Executive Program offers an array of scholarships supporting veterans, single parents, road warriors or those commuting more than 75 miles to attend class, employees of government and nonprofit organizations, and for those who make referrals for potential MBA executive students within their workplace or professional network. Eligible students may qualify for multiple scholarships. Visit uwo.sh/MBA scholarships for more information and eligibility requirements. That's uwo.sh/MBA SCHOLARSHIPS.
Interesting. And you've enjoyed that? Clearly.
Oh, yeah. It's enjoyed. I would say I find it very, very interesting. It's not enjoyable like watching a movie, reading a book, playing a chess game enjoyable, but it is very, very engaging. I find it to be very worthwhile. It's expensive. It's a good way to spend the time. It clearly leads to good payoffs. It keeps me interested.
And it's one of the characteristics we hear throughout these podcasts from the great leaders is they don't have the huge ego of they always need to be the one waving the flag, getting the accolades. They're happy to have their followers get the accolades and be in front.
Good to hear.
You did mention chess. I was going to bring that up at some point. You've played a few games of chess in your day?
Yeah.
Go on.
I started playing when I was young, really learned all the moves when I was in 10th grade. I knew how to play before then, but I didn't know all the rules. So I really started to play seriously in 10th grade and joined the United States Chess Federation, played in tournaments. And by the time I was finishing high school, I was a national chess expert and won the Region 5 Junior Championship, actually tied with one other guy. So that was Ohio, Indiana, Michigan, and Kentucky.
At age?
18.
18.
And I found chess to be a really good, hobbies are good, Dale. So there are lots of different hobbies. I have other hobbies too, but chess has been one that I've milked for decades. I'm currently the 2022. Well, the most recent Wisconsin, well, it's now January 3rd. So in every year, Wisconsin holds a tournament where the title of Wisconsin's senior champion is delivered.
You are the reigning.
And I am the reigning, as of a month or two ago, I became the current Wisconsin senior champion and have won the state championship a few times and the speed state championship once. And some of these were tied with other people, and Wisconsin doesn't have a whole lot of people from Eastern European descent. So the prowess in chess that's required to be a state champion in Wisconsin is a lot lower than what is required to be a state champion in some other parts of the country.
Well, you're being properly modest there.
Well, it's true.
But suffice it to say that you're exceedingly bright. And I'm not asking you to comment. I'm making a statement of fact, having known you for years. How has that impacted your ability to be a leader? You think that helps you? Does it hurt? You ever thought about the fact that you're damn bright and what it means to being a leader and your roles?
I've been around some people who are a lot brighter than I am, which is really humbling when you see people that are just crazy bright. So I consider myself to be, one of those average people that I work hard at it. Whatever. Dale, I have known some people that are just amazing.
I understand. It is, I think, fascinating in our society, the extent to which something about our society, are often very humble about accomplishments, where if I were to ask you, are you good at chess, you would say I'm
a good club player. So go into a club, I'll be
but
good.
You're not great.
No, and that was clarified to me when I was in my early 20s. So I finished college. I didn't play a whole lot of chess during college, but some. And I've got some stories on that. But then I started working in the Chicago area, first job out of college. And after a couple of years of work, I thought, I'm going to get back into chess. So when I was in high school, I had a coach. The guy was an international master, 12th best player by ranking in the United States, happened to live near my parents. And so he coached me, just like you would take lessons in anything else. And
yeah, like the rest of us takes lessons from the 12th best person in the world at X. Go on, Brian.
Yeah, so anyway, his name's Calvin. And one day from Chicago, I called him up on the phone. I said, Calvin, it's Brian. I'm calling from Chicago and haven't talked to you in a while. Hey, I'd like to get back into chess. Do you give lessons over the phone? This was 1987. And he said, sure. So I said, all right, what do I do? And he said, well, play some games, send him the games. So by that point, send him the games meant when you play a game, you keep score, you write the moves down, then you fold up the pieces of paper, put them in an envelope, send them through the mail, and within a few days, your coach gets the mail and he looks at the game score and he reviews the game with you and says, okay, had you thought about this move and why'd you play this and so forth. And you kind of reconstruct, how do I think it through better and make better moves in the future? Mm-hmm. So I sent him these games, and one of the games that we looked at was a game where I made a horrible move in the opening. I'm losing the whole game, and I ended up drawing because of little traps that I set for my opponent, trap after trap, and I was able to draw, which was a good result given that I started by making just a horrible move in the opening. So I'm on the phone, he's talking to me, and he says, Brian, he says, this game you played, it's one of the best games I've seen you play, even though you didn't win it. It's quality-wise, it's really good. He said, Brian, if you would just give up your job and really study chess hard, you could be a halfway decent player. Those were verbatim his words. You could give up your job, study chess real hard. You could become a halfway decent player. And I remember thinking that from his tone of voice, that he meant it as a compliment. And I understood immediately that, okay, Brian, you suck. You're never going to be any good. And that's just the way it is. So enjoy it as a hobby. And that's what I do.
That's interesting. So you put the thing in perspective, and I'll be good enough to be the reigning Wisconsin senior chess champion, but I know that I'm not going to make it to the level of Grandmaster, International, whatever the titles are, and that's okay.
That is correct.
Interesting to put it in that perspective.
But I think that's true with a lot of things in marketing or in business, is you figure out where can I compete at what level, and where can I have fun at what level, and where's the intersection of those things, and it's why you're here. I know that. And then you try and do it in a way that makes sense.
And that you enjoy.
Yeah.
Good. Well, let's talk a little bit about marketing.
Okay.
If I'm a business leader in the Fox cities or anywhere, and I'm not particularly focused on marketing. That's not my thing. Mm-hmm. I came through the ranks in operations or finance or HR or whatever it would be.
Yep.
Why is the study of marketing important to a business leader, whether there be in any of the other disciplines or eventually a CEO?
Well, I'm not sure you have to study marketing. So some people are good at it without apparently a lot of formal studying, because I've talked to a bunch of people in business who say, I don't know anything about marketing, but let me tell you some of the things I do. And I think, wow, you actually know a lot about marketing. So
they learned it some other way.
Correct. And sometimes we don't know where we learn things, and sometimes it's trial and error, and sometimes somebody showed me or it just made sense, and I kept doing things that worked, and I stopped doing things that felt like they were hitting me in the face. So I have some basic things that why a business owner or business leader or investor or somebody who has a sort of a high level stake in making sure a business is run well, why would that person should pay attention to marketing? Maybe 3 or 4 different issues. One is that almost every organization needs revenue to continue. And not just any revenue, but profitable revenue. If you sell something at a loss, it's not really good revenue. The marketing side of all the different functions that you've got in business, marketing and sales are responsible for generating the revenue. So as long as revenue...
In what sense?
Well, if your company is not generating enough profitable revenue, who do you look at? You look at the marketing person. You say, well, why
aren't we selling more?
Why aren't we selling more? And by selling more, it could be more units, could be to more people, could be at a higher price, but whatever it is, more dollars coming in the door that we can keep at the end of the day, and that enables us to continue to grow as a business. And the people in charge of marketing or sales, at the heart of what they do, it is in order to generate the profitable revenue, and businesses care about that. So that's one reason.
Okay.
Second reason is, I'll give you an analogy for the second one, and I would call it segmenting and targeting. But not every potential customer is a good customer, meaning a good fit for your business or service. And the analogy would be a baseball player who swings at the ball's coming at you. Do you swing at every ball? No. You pick which balls you're going to swing at and which ones you're not. Well, the same is true when you're going after customers. You want to be able to pick which customers do I spend my effort pursuing, and which potential customers are probably a better fit for somebody else's business. Most companies have competitors, and while many competitors sell similar products and services, there are often some differences between companies, and you want to figure out, all right, are there some differences that make me a more attractive supplier to some potential customers, and some differences that make my competitors a stronger supplier to other customers. If I spend all my time going after the wrong customers, those customers ultimately, they're not going to be happy with me. They're just going to leave me anyway. So I want to figure out how to identify the right customers. And that can be individual customers, or it could be groups of customers that we would call segments. And part of marketing is to figure out, where do you go?
So there are customers that effectively you don't want.
Correct. So we're at a university. We have admissions to bring in students who will pursue an undergraduate education at UW-Oshkosh. Okay, well, what makes somebody a good, attractive target for an effort by the university to bring them in to start an undergraduate degree with us? What do you think?
Well, I think we'd be interested in somebody who's going to finish that degree.
Okay. That's a good one. Somebody who's likely to be able to finish the degree, is motivated to do the degree, wants the degree, something like that. Okay? There's some other things that we would probably look for.
Go on. Intellectual capability to do it, I guess.
Okay.
Ethics.
Yeah, but okay, so you could be describing somebody who lives in Arkansas. Okay, probably not the right target. They've got other universities closer to them. Would we be happy to take out-of-state tuition from somebody from Arkansas who wants to come up here? Well, absolutely, if it's a good fit for them. But in terms of our spending on dollars to go chase prospective students, it's probably going to be students within Wisconsin, probably going to be people who are roughly 16 to 18 years old, are finishing a high school degree, and are checking the boxes to indicate they want to go to college, and maybe are interested in the type of degree that we offer here at Oshkosh. So you take a number of different factors and a number of those criteria into account, and you say, all right, I'm looking for people that fit this image. And when I find those people, I send them promotional material, advertising material, whatever, to see if they've got an interest in coming out to look at us as a next step, for example. Visit our campus, see what they think.
But first you're segmenting the potential. So if
Correct.
you're an Oshkosh, you're targeting folks different than if you're a Madison, different than if you're a Harvard?
Absolutely, yes. Look, some students are going to be happier in Madison. Some students are going to be happier and a better fit in Oshkosh. Some students will be a better fit not to go on to a 4-year degree, but some other kind of apprenticeship or other educational experience. Some are going to go directly from high school into study abroad somewhere, join the military, or do other really cool things. And that's great. And it's nonsensical to try and pretend that we are the right place for everybody. And that's true with most businesses. Who's the customer who looks like they would be better off buying from you versus not buying from you. You look for those people. They're likely to stay with you. So you're in Best Buy. Why do you see me there? Because I come there over and over and over again. Why? Because I'm a good fit for your business. And they treat me well and I go there.
And so you're looking for that person or that customer that fits well with your organization.
Correct.
We've heard folks in the various podcasts, leaders talk about their company's value proposition.
Correct.
Is that effectively related here, that the customer fit is the one who benefits from your value proposition?
Well said. Yes.
Okay. Good. Okay.
So,
anything else in terms of what?
Well, those were So those were the two of the four things. So there's the generating revenue, finding the right people to go after, and then you're actually getting to the third one when you say value proposition. It's really the larger picture is having a competitive distinct advantage. And the marketing technical term for it is differentiation, but you talk to normal people and what's your CDA? Competitive distinct advantage. Okay, I get that. And it is what's something where you can offer something to your customers, a value-oriented, that your customers find beneficial and different than your competitors, competitive distinct advantage. So marketers are often charged with figuring out, do we need to have a CDA? And if so, what should that be? And by the way, sometimes a company can be very, very profitable without having much of a CDA and being pretty similar to other suppliers because there's a growing market and people are going to choose one supplier or another, and you're going to get your fair share of customers, and even if you're not that different than other customers. So you could be profitable without a distinction. You could. Absolutely. Commodities are like that. There are lots of commodities that by nature, they're largely, you can't tell which supplier is making one brand versus the other, and that's okay as long as there's enough customers that spread their money around. There's nothing that differentiates my copper ore from your copper ore, and that's okay as long as there's a supply and demand of copper ore that makes us all happy, makes our customers happy, makes us happy. And then there are industries where you do see very little separation between some competitors and yet larger differentiation or distinctiveness between other competitors. Gas stations would be a common example. Some gas stations, as a customer, you don't really see all the nuances between the differences in the gas stations. So customers will say one gas station, another gas station, a third gas station, they're all kind of the same. Which one's on my right side as I'm turning in and I need fuel or whatever. And then in Wisconsin, we have Quick Trip, and they have a gas station, but they're a C-store too, convenience store. And they have really figured out how to become different in a way that customers value. So within the same industry, you may have some competitors that are less differentiated than each other, and other ones that are more, and other competitors that have chosen a path that makes them more distinctive. So the third one is competitive differentiation, CDA, and then the final one I would say from a big picture, somebody's got to be in charge, Dale, of figuring out what products are we going to be offering tomorrow, 5 years from now, as the future continues to go. We're now 2023. Well, let's look ahead to 2033. What are going to be the products and services between now and those next 10 years that we need to think about offering to our customers, and at what prices? And somebody's got to do that, whether it's a person with a title of marketing or not. Somebody's got to be putting their head on that, and that's something that marketers are charged with, is figuring out what products and services do we offer at what prices. And how do marketers, how are they able to answer that question? Depends on the industry, but it's to a large extent, you're trying to figure out what are people trying to buy, and how much value do they get out of something that enables me to figure out what are the boundaries of where I can price it. And pricing is, there are a number of different factors that you have to think of for pricing. So it's not just what are customers willing to pay, but it's also what are the competitive barriers out there that you can't overprice the competition to the point where you become unattractive. And there are legal rules and so forth. But you do have to have somebody thinking about what products and services should we be offering and at what prices. So those are the combinations of reasons why somebody who is looking down at a business saying, big picture, Why do I care? Because we need to generate revenue, and because we need to figure out who's our target customer and why, and we need to know what makes us distinct, if anything, from our competitors, and we need to know what kinds of products should we be offering in the future, products and services, and what kind of prices. And those are pretty important.
And now a short break to let some of the folks from the College of Business talk about various programs and services that the College of Business provides. Thank you.
The University of Wisconsin-Oshkosh Master of Business Administration program is powerfully positioned to help you advance your career. Join a strong network of more than 3,700 UWO MBA alumni in the Fox Valley and beyond, and take pride in earning a quality business degree from an AACSB accredited institution. Courses are led by award-winning faculty and industry experts, helping you develop personally and professionally during your time here. Take the first step toward an MBA by visiting uwo.sh/MBA to see all that UW Oshkosh has to offer. That's uwo.sh/MBA. Apply today.
Okay, so I'm a business leader, and I recognize those four things. Those four things sound pretty doggone important to me. I get it. But I'm not a marketing type. I'm a finance type. I'm a accounting type. What should I know about marketing versus saying, and we have people to do that. I don't know much about cars. I know a very limited amount, but there's a place that I take my cars to, and they fix the car. And sometimes they'll ask me questions about should we do this or that? I'm like, use your own judgment. I've been taking my car there for 30 years. I totally trust these people. They're great at what they do. And all right, I'm just taking my car there. I go to Quince. I'm sure there are many great mechanics in town, but I go to Quince and they do a wonderful job, and it works out well. And I know, roughly speaking, nothing about how a car operates. I mean, I get pistons and some very basics before I got an electric car, but I know exceedingly little, but don't feel I need to because I have Quince. If I'm a leader in a business, what should I know about marketing as opposed to, can I know nothing and just say, okay, well, we got marketing people who do that?
That does work. There are definitely businesses where the business leaders are their efforts should be directed towards some other area of the business. And as long as one or more people have their eyes onto how are we doing our marketing stuff, it works.
That works. So if I've got good marketing people, I can delegate it to them. They make great stuff happen, and I'm focused over here on operations or supply chain or finance or HR or whatever else they're doing as a leader, investor relations.
Sure. Well, as an example, you mentioned supply chain. So let's say that you make a part, and you mentioned cars. So let's say that you are one of the many companies that manufacture parts for cars. And we've got what's called derived demand. It's not like individuals, consumers are coming in to buy the part you make. They're buying the car, and the desire for your part that you make is derived from the consumer's desire to have a car. Okay? So they go to the car companies and they say, well, we want cars. The car companies go to your company that makes some parts for the cars, and they say, okay, Dale, this is what we need you to make.
Spark plugs, whatever it is.
Right.
I was ready to say carburetors, then I realized I was wrong.
All right. So at that point, you don't really need to know much about marketing. You need to be operationally efficient at producing the parts that your customers have told you they want. You're basically an order taker, and you can be very profitable at that in some industries. And so, I mean, a good leader, Dale, I think this is something that our students get out of our MBA program, and they probably know it going into our MBA program, is that a good leader isn't going to operate strictly by saying, here's my checklist of stuff to do. I'm going to check every box, and then how can I not make tons of success? A good leader needs to be able to figure out, all right, what are the most important things here and why, and where do my efforts need to be channeled?
Okay.
And in some industries and for some companies, marketing's a pretty major force. For some companies, less so. There are follower companies as opposed to leader companies, and companies that have engineering capabilities that put them at the leading edge of their industry as opposed to their marketing capabilities. And then there are companies like Nike who are known for being marketing folks. And think back to cars, Lee Iacocca, and came from marketing. And some car companies did have had visionary leaders that were successful because of the marketing stuff, and some had success or failure for other reasons, though.
Because they were good at the engineering.
That's
or
right.
The other
like
aspects.
Chevrolet. Yeah.
Right. Okay. How would a business leader know if the people they're hiring in the marketing arena are doing their job? I don't know marketing. I'm on the board of a company. How do I know if the company people are doing marketing well?
We look at several metrics. One metric is how much revenue you're generating and benchmarked against something, and is it profitable revenue?
Okay.
So companies will sometimes benchmark that year over year, or they might benchmark against an industry standard, but some measure of revenue. And frankly, as you see in recessionary periods, your revenue might go down and you still beat your benchmarks because the revenue went down for the whole industry. And for some companies, that's totally fine. Shell Oil used to be like that. And for some companies, no, that's not fine, and they try and shake things up. But there's going to be a revenue criteria, I would hope. There's also a customer criteria, or a couple customer criteria. You could have tons, but some of your customer criteria would be loyalty among customers. Do they shop from you over and over? Do they choose you as their supplier as opposed to somebody else when they're in the market again?
Okay.
Now that works better for some industries than for other industries, because in some industries, customers buy very frequently, and in other industries, customers buy very infrequently. Well, if you're in an industry where customers buy very infrequently, then I wouldn't think customer loyalty would be your highest, among your high criteria.
You're a real estate person. How often do I buy a house? Not very often. Loyalty doesn't matter.
Right, but then you might get into commercial real estate, and then that might be a little bit different.
Okay.
So a customer criteria of repeat business and growing customer accounts. If you're looking to see, do your marketing people, are they doing a good job? Well, show me the sort of the trek, if you will, the journey of customers. Are we getting an equitable amount of customers? Are they good fit customers? Do they continue to buy more? Are they loyal? Do they stay with us? Do they refer other people to our company? And do we generate profit from them? And what kinds of products are we, if we strategically as a company believe we need to move toward these products over the next 10 years, are the marketing and sales people driving success for those new products as they come out? It's not rocket science. It's just sort of a logical thought process of what do we need to be successful overall as a company? What are the dynamics of how marketing plays into that? And can I measure that in some reasonable way? It doesn't have to be a perfect measure. A measure of something important is better than no measure at all.
Right.
Even an approximate measure of something important is sometimes all you get. But those are things I'd be looking at. I'd also be looking at, does the story make sense? If you talk to the folks in charge of marketing and you ask them, please explain what you do and why, they should be able to explain some basic things that really make sense. I mean, as an example, are you more marketing driven or are you more sales driven?
What's the distinction? Help us.
Well, marketing, so these are not defined terms that everybody agrees in. It's not like some areas of medical or other areas where everybody's got a shared definition of something. But in sales, you have more individual efforts to work with customers one at a time.
Okay.
So yeah, I work with this customer, I work with that customer. Every customer has slightly different needs. They may have a different buying process. This is very typical in complex business to business kinds of environments and so forth. Okay, so consider, for example, Alliance Laundry. They sell laundry machines, laundry equipment. And they're out in Ripon, fabulous company, international footprint, and they sell to both the business-to-business market, and they have some sales to the business-to-consumer market.
But they're selling to hospitals, to...
Correct. Laundromats, hotels, cruise ships, prison systems, dormitories, you name it. So those would be the commercial laundry applications. And then there would be consumers, like a Dale goes into his local shop and says, well, I really want an industrial quality washer and dryer. What can you tell me? And they tell you about the Speed Queen brand. But for the story that makes sense, sales versus marketing, how the hospital buys their washers and dryers is going to be very, very different than how a consumer buys a washer and dryer. And for a complex purchase where if you're the hotel and you need washers and dryers, you might want to talk to the company that makes the washers and dryers, or somebody who has really high expertise that can talk to you about the right capacities and how much electricity is needed, and do you have the right ventilating system, and do your circuits, can they handle the voltage in the water and everything else, or do you what kind of system installation do you need and support? Whereas the consumer is going to largely go to their local appliance store, or if they buy online or whatever they're doing, and they don't need the same kind of sales support. So sales is typically more of they're different types of sales. So I'm hedging.
But the latter of those two is more marketing.
Correct.
You're marketing to me. I'm seeing ads on TV,
right.
Store display, what have you, that convinces me that, oh, this brand is better than that brand.
Correct. So the marketing function in some companies dominates over the sales function, because in those companies, the company's selling something that the way their customers buy is not through a salesperson. Customers say, well, I just want to go online to my retailer and purchase something. And if that's the way people are really going to buy, then it's a waste of time putting a whole lot of effort into the selling process. You run the marketing process. However, if your customers are wanting to have tailored solutions where you really need to configure things correctly for each individual customer, customers might want a little bit of this and a little bit of that, and your recommendation is going to change. Well, then you need to put more money into a sales process. And then when you hire somebody in marketing, the role of that person in marketing is to support the sales team. So the marketing people might help develop the collateral or the brochures and other stuff, and the marketing person might help develop the image of the company brand that you're selling, and the marketing people might help you identify the trade shows to send your salespeople to attend so they can collect leads and things like that. But the role of marketing is very, very different in that sales-driven organization than it is in a more marketing-driven organization. So when you talk to your marketing people and you try and figure out, how do I know if this is making sense? Well, one of the things you ought to do is tell them, okay, tell me how customers are our main customer segments. How do they, I get it, every customer may buy a little bit differently, but give me a couple examples of how our customers primarily buy, and what are the kinds of things that we're doing, and it should make sense.
Okay, that makes a lot of sense. Mm-hmm. Feels logical. There's often tension in organizations between the marketing function, say, and operations. That I'll hear operations people say, well, those doggone marketing people, they come back and they've talked to the customers and they tell us this is what the customer wants. And the operations folks are like, well, but we don't make that. We don't know how to make that. And we can't possibly make that at the price the marketing people say. And the marketing people say, well, that's what the customer wants. How do you think of the tension between the marketing function and the engineering function or the operations function, various functions within an organization?
It's a good question. I have a couple knee-jerk reactions, and then maybe I can. But the knee-jerk reactions.
Why the other ones are wrong?
No, not at all. My first reaction. There's a quote by, I think it's Fred DeVito, and it's, "If it doesn't challenge you, it won't change you." That's a quote I heard a long time ago.
Okay.
And to some extent, challenges are. It's depressing to think, I just did all this work and now you're telling me I got to do something else. Okay, but that's a challenge. And those challenges help us become stronger. So to some extent, when one area of the organization goes to another area of the organization and says, okay, now we got to rethink this because something happened externally that's going to force a change. Well, yeah, that's just part of how business happens. And it happens to all of us. There's another, that was one of my knee-jerk reactions, is that those challenges and struggles aren't always bad. That's a sign that we're doing things well, and those challenges are good. Not all of them, but some of them. The other knee-jerk reaction I have is something that I call professional bigotry, where there are people in one job function because of their training or the other people they've worked with and so forth. they believe they're better than people in some other area. So, for example, I've seen this in accounting, and maybe it doesn't hold universally true in accounting, but you have the public accountants, and then the private accountants, and then the government accountants, and there's this sort of pecking order. And I've talked to people that were public accountants and then went into private accounting, and it's not like they now know less. Their expertise has actually grown, but they get looked at a little bit as almost second-class citizens. Well, we're the public accountants. And then you have your medical specialists and your generalists, and it's human nature to, was it Dale Carnegie said, one of the most driving motivations behind people is the desire to feel important, and the way we get that sometimes is to feel that the role that we play is important. Well, okay, but you take that to the extreme, and all of a sudden people complain about some other role, and they say, those people don't know what they're doing. That's just not always true. It can be sometimes, but anyway.
No, I hear what you're saying. As an HR guy,
right.
I'm very happy to announce that everything in an organization that's profitable is because some human resource made the decision. Therefore, human resources are the most important thing in an organization. I'm also well aware of the fact that for many folks, they think we in HR can't possibly make a decision until we first hold hands, sing Kumbaya, and give everybody a hug, because we're mostly concerned with everybody feeling good as opposed to being profitable. So
okay,
you're right. There are these professional differences. One last question: introspection. You have shared a fair amount of introspection today on how good you could become or not become at chess. You've shared some introspection in terms of the importance of introspection with regard to what the role of marketing ought to be in an organization, et cetera. What role has introspection played in your growth and development over time, and how have you developed the ability to be introspective?
I'm not sure.
Do you think of yourself as introspective?
Sometimes yes. Sometimes no.
Go on.
So I was at Fratello's years ago, and Al was there, and Phil Florek was there.
Okay.
And they were having a conversation. Phil was running a company south of Oshkosh, and Al was our dean. And they were having we were drinking beer, and the conversation was about, if somebody's doing something wrong, when do you tell them? At the end of the week, at the beginning of the week? I mean, something seriously wrong that they got to go think about. And I remember Al saying, I would tell them on a Friday, because then they could have time to themselves, sort of mentally heal, let the wound close before they come back to work the following Monday, give them some time alone. And Phil said, I would tell them on a Monday, because I want to make sure that I see them after I've told them, so I can see how they handled it, and are they okay with it, and if I need to intervene, I can do it right away. And then I forget which one of them looked at me and asked me my opinion. I said, well, I don't know, but if you tell me I did something wrong, you ought to tell me Friday and Monday and Tuesday and Wednesday and Thursday, because it takes a while sometimes for me to get it through my thick skull, because I'm pretty persistent. I often believe in what I'm doing, and I don't always have that introspective component to slow down, stop, and think. But on the other hand, there have been times where it's just become very clear to me, okay, I got to shift gears. Something that I'm doing isn't working as well as I want it to, and I know everything that I do can always be done better. So I'm receptive to the idea about, okay, this is a time where I need to pivot and figure out what to do. And I'm not sure I have a clean ability to tell you, Dale, why sometimes I go one way and sometimes I go another way. I'm pretty stubborn, but sometimes I've been good at figuring out, all right, I got to do something different.
So as a strong leader, would be important to be aware of their follower, and maybe you tell some of them on Friday, you tell some of them on Monday, and some of them you tell them Monday through Friday.
Yes. So if you treat everybody the same, you're probably not treating anybody correctly. Which I get it, as the HR guy, you might want to throw sticks at me for that.
No, I'm a big fan. I think equal is not equitable.
All right.
But say that again. If you treat
everybody the same, then you're not doing the right thing for anybody, because everybody's different. And in fact, one of the metrics that I've used in customer research has been, do you feel treated like a person and not a number? Which is for many people a very important feeling, as though their brand, their company, their employer, whoever is treating them like an individual. And we get this notion sometimes about, in order to be equitable, you got to treat everybody the same. And from my years in business before going into academia, and I did work in management most of those years, and no, you have to understand every situation has these little nuances, and you don't just go in with your pre-planned approach and execute it without thinking it through. And a good leader thinks it through and figures out, okay, what makes sense here?
And it can be different in situation A than situation B.
And if you're in the private sector, you can do that a little bit more than if you're in the public sector, where I think for various reasons, some of which make sense, people put aside the question of what's the right thing to do, and they think, okay, I'm going to follow the process.
And that can be good and it can be frustrating.
Correct.
Okay. Very good. Bryan, thank you very much. I appreciate you taking time out of your busy schedule to come and share some of your insights with regard to leadership and with regard to marketing. Thank you very much.
All right.
Bye.
Bye.
Thank you all.
It's Time is a production of the University of Wisconsin-Oshkosh College of Business Graduate Programs in association with Venture Project Studios. Executive producer, Aaron J. Armstrong. Host, Professor Dale Feinauer. Creative Director, Madison Potratz. Director of Photography, Elazar Kloon. Audio and Video Editor, Elazar Kloon. Marketing Strategy, Tara Larson. Social Media, Anwar Mahana. A special thanks to L Creative, Top View Media, Michael Patton, and the University of Wisconsin-Oshkosh College of Business Graduate Programs.